hermeneutics of beauty. Right? The hermeneutics of suspicion is, right, it's born from the godfathers of postmodernity. This is a recursive point. It comes out of Freud and Marx and Nietzsche, right? And they are so now what we do is we suspect everything. There's a hidden motive, there's a secret agenda, there's a conspiracy. And the moment of truth is the moment where we uncover and we reveal, j'accuse, where we reveal, right, the conspiracy.
And the propositions are trying to deceive you into getting you to do the procedure that it wants.
Yeah, exactly. And this is prevalent. And then the point has been, it goes all the way back deeply into Plato, and you can see it running through into Hegel and Merleau-Ponty. Merleau-Ponty makes it really plain. He says, pay attention to, you cannot point to something as an illusion unless you're standing in something you take to be real. Illusions are parasitic on experiences, meaningfully structured experience, that you take to be in conformity to reality.
Right.
It makes no sense to say it's all an illusion. That's like saying everything's tall.
Right. Like when Daniel Dennett says consciousness is an illusion. Well,
and who's it an illusion to, and where is the illusion happening?
Yes.
Right?
Is an illusion a conscious experiance? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's like there's no illusion in physics in the sense of an ontological entity. There's mass and energy. Oh, and look, there's illusion, and you measure it. Like, that's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah. All of those moves, I think, are like mistaken. So the hermeneutics of suspicion is the idea that appearances are deceptive and distractive, right, and distorting, but they're dependent on the idea, not the idea, that's exactly the wrong word. They're dependent on the disclosure, right, the phenomenological realization of appearances as disclosing reality, as not being deceptive, as not being distractive, as not being distortive. And I put it to you, and this is D.C. Schindler, another Neoplatonist Christian, by the way, his proposal that should be the proper understanding of beauty, right? That beauty is when appearance discloses the depth of realness. Can beauty be hijacked? Anything can be hijacked. That's not a reason for rejecting it, right? So, and we have to remember, and this is Hahn's critique in Saving Beauty, we've reduced beauty to the smooth, to the pleasing. If you look in you read Plotinus says beauty is joyous, wondrous, and distressing. It should shock you. It distresses you. And, more recent thinkers, more recent thinkers like Scarry about beauty, right? The hermeneutics of beauty is more primordial and grounding than the hermeneutics of suspicion. It is dependent on the hermeneutics of beauty. And I think this is one of the great claims of Neoplatonism. I've been reading a lot of theology, and that Balthasar, Schindler, Clark, all of these people, and it's no coincidence that they're deeply Neoplatonic, are pointing theology to beauty as where theology needs to go right now. That's not me imposing on them. That is what they are talking about, and they're opening, and I'm reading Balthasar's book on Maximus, trying to feed two birds with one stone, right? And this stuff, the hermeneutics of beauty is exactly what I'm talking about. Beauty is when we have good phenomenological reason to believe that our appearances are disclosing reality. Our attempts to make sense, phenomenologically make sense, not just conceptually, lived make sense, are in contact with reality. I'm reading Meek's book on contact with reality. She's integrating Polanyi and Merleau-Ponty and D.C. Schindler, and this is exactly the same point again and again and again. And I think Neoplatonism, one more advocacy for it, right, gives us a place where we can properly talk about reprioritizing the hermeneutics of beauty. It's not, by the way, this does not eradicate the hermeneutics of suspicion. You need it, because there are conspiracies and there are cabals and there is propaganda, there is bullshit. But it's to properly reorient us to say, no, but that is ultimately always dependent on a hermeneutics of beauty. And Neoplatonism, and it's no coincidence that all these modern theologians are current. I want to stop using that adjective, modern. All these recent theologians are using Neoplatonism to do that, because Neoplatonism makes that argument repeatedly. That's the ancient argument against the Gnostics.
Yeah. I mean, an evolutionary argument for beauty, a common discussion in evolutionary biology now is like, well, maybe does evolution evolve faster than pure random chance, right? Because and it seems to evolve way faster. And the neo-intelligent design people out there like to point out the mathematical problems that it doesn't seem like we've had enough time for random chance to do the job that it seemingly is attributed to have accomplished. And so the answer to that is, well, who says that evolution can't be faster than random chance? But what tools would it have to go faster than random chance? Yes. And one of them seems to be beauty. Like, why are birds so beautiful? Right, and of faceted beauty, is it seems to be that one of the tools that birds use to evolve more quickly is both to get good at perceiving beauty and embodying beauty, right? Sexual selection takes both of those things. You need to get good at perceiving the thing that you want and embodying the thing that you want. Often the female is the selector and the perceiver, and the male is the embodiment and demonstration of beauty. And seemingly that seems to, be so useful that birds waste extraordinary amounts of energy on being beautiful, even at the sacrifice of being fit in other ways, like being a red cardinal is not a particularly useful thing. Being a turkey with a giant, tail fan is not, useful, except in the fact that it communicates beauty, and beauty seems to communicate something deep about fitness. And why would that be the case if it wasn't if beauty weren't fundamental to the revelation of truth that comes through embodiment, like I was talking about?
Exactly. The argument that's made, and many people think they're sort of explaining beauty away, is we're attracted to these features that disclose health and vitality and cognitive flexibility. We find humor beautiful, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Really weird. But
musical talent,
Yeah, but why? Because what beauty is the appearances are disclosing the reality of the being, right? Mm-hmm. That's what these arguments are actually presupposing. Can it get hijacked? It can, right? You have creatures that mimic and they're not really, etc. But that only works. That's, and pun intended, that's parasitic on beauty actually disclosing, right? Functioning to disclose the depths of some particular being, but also environments and perhaps even the world in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I should get going soon. When you say that, right, there's a love relationship between form and potential. And by the way, just an aside, that thing about the fire, what breathes fire into the equations, that is a good way of challenging the idea that what Plato meant by the forms was just abstract formalisms. Plato doesn't mean that. He means, right, exactly. So just to bring that in. Mm-hmm. So what breathes fire into the formulas, or the equations, even a better word, and right, is somehow bound up with the emergence up and the emanation down. Is that correct so far?
Yes.
So what is it? So we are stepping, we're in the proper sense, we're abstracting. We're saying human love is an exemplary instance of what we're talking about. We're not saying that everything is an instance of that. We're saying the opposite. At least that's what I'm hearing you say. You could be understood to be saying one of two things. Mm-hmm. Everything is an instance of human love, or you could be saying human love is an instance of some other broader ontological relationship. And I take you to be saying the second rather than the first. Correct. Is that fair? Yes. Okay. So what we need to do is, what is it that you want to be seeing in love that can be abstracted in the proper sense of the word, not into cold formalisms? Mm-hmm. Want to keep the fire, right? Mm-hmm. What is it that's being abstracted out that can be applied directly to the ontological relationship between form and potential, between emanation and emergence? I know that was a very long question, but you see what I was trying to do with it?
Yes.
I was trying to break it out, and I was trying to get it out of feeling and an emotion and into an existential stance of relationship. And then how does that generalize, right? So that we've properly seen human love as an instance of something more universal rather than the reverse.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, good point. I think I'm going to start with how Schindler describes love being related to the transcendentals.
Yes. I think that's excellent proposal. Let's begin there.
Because Schindler will explain that love is primarily related to beauty. Like, first, what will happen is that he even writes that love is caused by beauty. So once we are attracted, we start at the human level, let's say, once we are attracted towards something beautiful, this awakens a kind of love in us that brings us towards that thing. So it involves both our appetite and our intellect. That's how we say it. There is something intelligible in the thing that we find beautiful. It's not just a sort of blind romantic attraction towards something.
Yes.
There is truth.
You're drawn,
yes. There is truth that will ultimately be revealed, but Schindler will see truth as being revealed at the end of this movement. So initially, we're drawn in love towards beauty. This sort of drawing, this moving that this does in us has to do with our will towards something that is good. So then this, ultimately, Schindler doesn't say that good, like our attraction to the good has only to do with, let's say, our will and not our intellect, but let's say goodness will still move the will, and it will be easy to sort of stay there. Schiller doesn't want to. Ultimately, he thinks that beauty will allow all of the poles to coexist. So we are attracted towards the good, and in this movement towards the good, ultimately we will reach the thing, which will then disclose its truth. So we have access to the logos, that L, that one of those other L's that you mentioned.
Yes.
So
I guess, sorry to interrupt, but I want to slow it down.
Yeah.
So, and I know Schindler like explicitly says he's using, the method of analogy, right?
Yeah.
And of course, even Nietzsche is using will to power. He's willing to use psychological terms ontologically. Goes back to Fichte probably, who starts that progression. But what I'm trying to get at, without reverting to panpsychism, in what way do inanimate things? In what way are inanimate things drawn by beauty?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah,
it's easier, I think, to do with goodness. So maybe we can try to go there at least temporarily, because I think it was a very old idea. You can find it in Aquinas and probably way before, that everything moves towards its good, so that even a stone moving down a hill would be moving towards its good. And this requires some adjustments today, because we don't, let's say, keep just Aristotelian science, but I think we can recover at least this still sense of teleology, just in the basic fact that, and we've talked about this mainly with Paul, that if you look at any equations, any equation, let's say how an electron behaves, the fact that it's an intelligible relation, we can write it down into an equation. There is something that the electron will do in this kind of scenario, even if we have to use probabilities. There is something
yes
towards which the electron is moving. We use probability to describe it, but it's the movement of the electron. It's moving towards its good, we can say. Obviously, this is not going to be the same kind of good as it is for me to raise a child correctly, for instance. It's a much lower kind, but I don't think that Aquinas or the others were falling into the kind of panpsychist issue there of taking a human good and putting it into what's happening in a stone. And I want to do the same kind of thing with beauty too, saying that obviously there's a lot more when I am drawn towards something beautiful, when I love something beautiful, but still, and I don't, and it's hard for me to specify what this would be exactly for an electron to love protons and to dislike other electrons, let's say. But there's something about this. And also, it's okay. Let's not just talk about goodness. Let's try to bring in logos as well, because it is in doing. Let's say it is in moving towards its good that the electron will exhibit the pattern of the electron that we can quantify and turn into an equation. There is a structure there. There is a logos to the electron that is disclosed by the electron moving towards its good. So I'm not sure how satisfyingly this can answer your question, but I think I can draw the analogy.
Well, it's not unsatisfactory. We're doing something very exploratory. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm trying to. Okay, so I'm trying to. There's a bunch of things that I sense them moving towards, but I don't know if I can articulate it, but I'll try. Okay, so one of the things D.C. Schindler talks about, which I think has been very, very powerful, I talk about him challenging the hermeneutics of suspicion with the hermeneutics of beauty, where beauty is a way of describing how appearances, right, are actually disclosing of reality rather than distorting or distracting from reality, right? And then the idea that I've been trying to get at with that is this: I've been about the what I call trying to get a phenomenology of the Platonic forms, is this idea of, so here's all the appearances of this, right? All the aspects, right? And we don't actually ever see the whole object. We can't, because every aspect reveals and conceals, right?
Yeah.
And so there is what I call the through line. This is what, because the original meaning of eidos was the look of something, its aspect, right? But what I think what Plato was doing is he was trying to get at this idea that, and this is influenced by Merleau-Ponty. Just give me a sec, because this will go somewhere. Okay, right? The idea that there's a through line to this that is not itself any aspect. It is that which binds all possible aspects together, and there's an inexhaustibleness to this, right? It's like a melody that strings all the notes together. All the notes are an appearance of the melody, right? That they disclose the melody because there's a through line that runs through them. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Right. And so for me, part of what is going on when we're talking about love is that we have bound ourselves to the through line of a person, in that we're taking all of their aspects and all of their appearances. We are comporting ourselves so that we can see through, in the sense of by means of and beyond, all of the aspects and all of the appearances. And in that sense, we're not grasping, better word, we're realizing the beauty of the person because we have found ourselves adduced, drawn into the through line. Is that?
Yes, yes, that's good.
And so I see that process, and you can see both logos and love as our experience of logos and our experience of love are different ways of talking about that. Is that okay so far?
Yes, yes.
And so for me, what I say is, what I'm having in love, when I'm experiencing love, I have this particular stance, particular relationship that in which I'm caught up in the through line. And when I'm in dialogos, I'm also with another person. We are getting all the aspects, and we're finding the through line. Is that okay so far?
Yes, yes, that's good. Yeah.
And so, and then what I take the Platonic idea to be is there is not only a through line for each thing, there's through lines like between levels of being. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So I'm trying really hard here. And so there, you can think, in fact, that in some way an electron is, right, what the intrinsic nature of the electron is never caught up in any of its appearances or aspects. It is the no thingness that is the through line of all of those appearances of the electron. And that's exactly what you're trying to put your finger on with the intrinsic nature.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, yeah, that's a very good proposal. Yeah. And to try to go ahead.
And then the way the electron is caught up in that, right? And we have to use temporal language for something that's ontological, right? Is something that we can have an equivalent sense of when we commit the through line that we call ourself, the through line of all of our psychological aspects and appearances, to the through line of anything. And that is to be caught up in its beauty. But it's not that the electron is experiencing beauty, it's that the electron is instantiating a beauty, and we can experience it by also instantiating it in a kind of participatory knowing. That's what I'm trying to suggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think I agree with that.
Right, the greatest of these is love. I get it. This is a central, right, Christian pronouncement. I'm not trying to take that away from you. It's not what I'm trying to get at in what is the nature of its greatness. It could be, right, you could be saying, well, everything is just it's just a version of what I feel when I'm loving, and the electron is like has a tremendous amount of affection and memory for the proton, and I think that's ridiculous. We don't believe that, right? But for me, I have the phrase that love is its own kind of knowing. Like when you say you can't see it as anything other than love, what is it about love that is the greatest for you? I guess is what I'm trying to get. Why is that? And I totally agree with you. You know, the integration of agape and logos together in Christian Platonism is really profound. So please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to trespass on that. I want to understand, how would you reply to somebody who said, "Oh, you're just speaking metaphorically"?
Yeah, that is, yes, really good, actually great clarifying questions. Why? Well, I think that maybe at its deepest, if let's say I want to speak of love, not just at the human level, but I want something that is as general and as general as possible.
Yeah,
I would describe it as what can cause. I don't know if cause is the right word, but I'll go with it for now. What can cause?
Well, vertical causation, not horizontal causation. Yes, vertical, ontological, not spatiotemporal. Yes.
Yeah, but that cause. I was also not finished with the words I was going to say. So that can cause multiplicity and unity to cohere, or maybe so some other way to say it is to allow multiplicity to exist in unity. So that's what we see in, let's say, the mother and the child, but I think it's true at other layers. And maybe what is most crucial, I think, is that
wow, I see. So when you say love, you're pointing to the deep issue of the one and the many, how the multiplicity can exist in the one and how the one can exist in the multiplicity.
Yes.
You are actually pointing to the deep interdependence of emanation and emergence. That's what you mean.
Yes. And so I see, there are greater and lesser instances of this, but like I can see it in the way that some electrons and protons and neutrons can bond together to form an atom. I can have like electrons and I can have electrons and protons, all these things existing at the same time as I have an atom without reducing any one to the other. And I see the same kind of thing, only much greater in humans, let's say, where the mother and her infant are able to coexist in a way that won't, like, the mother won't dissolve her child into her, and the child also won't just like destroy the mother into himself. The mother will actually afford the growth of the infant so that it becomes as independent as possible, even. Sure. Like they will have greater love from one another to the extent that they support even one another's independence. And like at the greatest of scales, this is the relationship between God and the world, where, as we mentioned earlier, the love that is God can create a world that is distinct from God and yet imitates God in that it is causing almost itself by pursuing God. So I see this relationship between the one and the many going on at all layers, and even somehow in the Trinity, but I can't really talk about what's going on in the Trinity.
Properly interpretation of the meaning of God, the logos of God. So you go from beauty to goodness to truth, and then there's a little epilogue at the end. Now, the basic purpose of Balthasar's magnum opus here is the basic purpose really of all theology in its proper sense, and that is it's meant to communicate the faith. To communicate the faith. That's very easy to say and simple to say, but that's really a profound thing. To communicate the faith doesn't mean simply give arguments for it, to explain it, to convince, and so forth. It includes all of those things, but it's much more. It's passing on the faith. Now, it's important to recognize that the faith is not a mere subjective disposition, an inclination, a willingness to believe. When we talk about faith, particularly from the classical tradition, faith has an objective dimension. It's both the subjective disposition, but also the objective content. And communicating the faith means attending to both in a way, provoking a certain subjective disposition, simultaneous with presenting a particular content. And we'll see why beauty is so essential to that. But even simply stating it in those terms, we have to recognize that there's a fundamental problem that faces us right away, right at the outset, with this notion of the intelligible content, the objective content, the meaning of faith. And what is that? Faith is the appropriation of the mysteries of God. And God is obviously infinite and infinitely transcendent of our capacity to understand, our capacity even to perceive in a way. God is beyond all human capacity. So here's the problem. How do we communicate this mystery in a way that makes it accessible, but at the same time does not reduce its mystery? And there are two possible false ways of doing that, two missteps, you might say, that are, I think, very obvious once the moment we reflect on it. The one would be to reduce the infinite mystery of God to human size, as it were, simply to reduce this great mystery to our human capacity to understand. So to reduce the mystery of God to our concepts, to reduce the mystery of God even to our sentiments. The essay in the appendix of the book on kitsch is very interesting in that regard. The reduction of beauty to human sentiment. It seems to me that there's something analogous in theological expositions. We can reduce God to our sentiment. So that's one, that we cut down the mystery of God. The other misstep, the other false approach, would be to overemphasize the mystery of God. It might seem to be a very pious thing to, in the end, fall down in silence and speak of the infinite darkness of the mystery of God. That, in some sense, that seems like a very pious act. But notice, if we absolutize that, in a certain sense, we're going to end up taking the fangs out of Christianity. When something becomes an infinite mystery, it can no longer really speak to us. It can no longer make any sort of claim on us. It's very interesting if you see in some thinkers who are radically apophatic in the sense that tend to overemphasize the mystery of God. They tend to obscure, for example, questions of morality. That in a sense, morality doesn't really matter because we're talking about the infinite mystery of God. But notice, we're trying to preserve God's greatness, and in a certain sense, we do that by reducing him to something that's not making any claim on us. So this over mystifying, mystiquing of God is also a false move. It's almost saying that God has not revealed himself to us. There's no difference in this case between God having revealed himself to us and not having revealed himself to us on that false route. So somehow, on the one hand, we reduce God to the finite. On the other hand, we have God as pure infinity. And both of these are problematic. Now, Balthasar believes that the way out of this problem is beauty, that beauty is really crucial. Why? To put it in a very, very simple nutshell, what beauty does is it does not you might say, simply bring the infinite down to our terms, as it were, to our level. But beauty, in fact, raises us up, lifts us up into the mystery. And in ways that summary that Professor Crosby put at the end of his talk of the implications of some of von Hildebrand's insights fit this point very beautifully, as we'll see. That beauty has this extraordinary capacity to reach down into our very flesh, and yet reach down into that flesh with a spiritual light. And so it has this marvelous capacity to bridge the gap. This is something that Plato saw. Plato is not a Platonist. The Platonists tend to divide the spiritual and the sensible, but Plato in the Phaedrus, he says that beauty is the one spiritual form that we can actually see with our physical eyes, that it somehow is so radiant that it can actually reach our senses, and that then provides the pivot for the whole for him.